Murkowski to the joint session.
Ladies and gentlemen, the U.S. Senator for the great state of Alaska, the Honorable Lisa Murkowski.
Well, good morning, everyone. Morning. Yeah, that's good enthusiasm. President Stevens, Speaker Tilton, to the members of the Alaska State Legislature. Okay, that's my formal part of it, and know that I am pleased to be with you yet again for my annual address to the legislature. To talk about our state's future and to talk about our future together. Those of you that have listened to my comments in previous years know that I always start my remarks out with a little bit of a family update. I share the latest on my husband, Vern, our two sons, Nick and Matt. But I will tell you, I look out this morning and it's different. It's a different look. There's many of you that I don't know yet. I'm looking forward to getting to know you. You probably don't know that my sons, who are just now in their early 30s, they literally wore their first ties when they were guest pages here in this chamber when they were just 8 years old. So we go back a long way here in this body. Time really flies. It's been 24 years since I first entered this chamber as a state representative. I served alongside of a few of you that are still here. Gary back here, Donnie in the back, Lyman sitting right next to Donnie there. I guess that's the old guys row back there. I don't know about that, but Representative Foster, where's Neil? Stuck in Nome with a blizzard. Well, I didn't serve with Neil, but I served with his dad, Richard, and Richard would serenade us with his birthday tributes, which were always quite amusing. And Representative Sadler, while you weren't serving here in this body, I think that you were probably singing in some of the legislative skits back there. I'm sure there's some tapes out there, but we're not going to bring those up. So to those of you who are continuing your service, I'm glad that your commitment to Alaska continues to run strong. To those of you who are beginning your first term, I want to congratulate you. It's really good. It's refreshing. It's right. It's great to see so many new faces, to see the diversity, know your passion that you are bringing to our state. And I want to give a particular shout out and commend the House freshmen who have created this informal, bipartisan caucus, to Representative Ruffridge, to Representative Gray, all of you who have joined. just what a great idea. Really, what a great idea. In these divided times, it's important that we know one another. We need to know one another so that we can work with one another and work well with one another to achieve for Alaska. And as you get to know one another, you're never quite sure who you actually may meet here, how your lives might be connected over time. Among the freshmen in my class back in 1999, there was a young woman who I became fast friends with. Her name was Mary. And today, Mary and I work in the same building. We're still friends, carrying on the legacy of the Alaska legends who came before us, including the Congressman for all Alaska, our own Don Young, who we continue to miss him every single day. So you've heard from Mary and Dan over the past couple weeks. So there's probably not much left to be said. I'm here to do wrap up. But I'm sure that you heard from their comments. We're a small delegation, but we're a pretty mighty delegation. Our gruffness rating, I think, has gone down just a touch, but I think our effectiveness is still high. We're a good team for Alaska, and we work hard to bring home results. And of course, we can't do what we do without the teams that are behind us, just as you cannot do your jobs. On that front, I want to introduce some of the members of my staff who are here in the gallery with us today. Amber Ebarb is all the way in the corner there. Amber is my new staff director on the Indian Affairs Committee. She is Tlingit. She's raised in Anchorage. She's got family members from Hoona. Next to her is Erin Thiel. Erin has been my advisor on energy and natural resources. Some of you may have recalled working with him when he was doing the same work over on the Energy and Natural Resources Committee when we were running the committee there. Kevin Swanson, sitting next to him, joined us from Congressman Young's office. He's my advisor on transportation, broadband, and a lot more. So when we're talking infrastructure, a lot of you have made contact with Kevin there. And then Matt Robertson is my new fish guy. He's from the Golden Heart City of Fairbanks and doing a great job for us. You're going to see a few others wandering about the building here over the next couple of days. Caleb Freilich, who's my chief, as well as Kate Williams-Stern, my deputy chief, both from here in Juneau, although Kate will remind me, no, I'm from Douglas, so got to make that distinction. You'll also see my ledge director, Angela Ramponi, my communications director, Karina Borger. Both of them hail from Soldotna. And then Brian Hughes, who many of you have known over the years, is also wandering the halls here. We're here to make connections with you and your teams, to really be sharing some good ideas, brainstorming on how we can solve some problems together. We've got a good team, and I'm really proud of them. It's a team that works tirelessly for Alaskans. I'm proud of what we were able to do this past Congress, and together with the delegation, with many of you, I think we've helped people and improve our state. We responded to more than 8,000 individuals who wrote directly to my office. We opened and successfully closed hundreds of cases for Alaskans who needed assistance with everything from passport renewals to missing Social Security payments. It seems like nobody contacts their Senate office until like 3 days before that critical trip, and they realize my passport's expired. That's where we come in. It's not the sexy stuff that makes the headlines, but boy, oh boy, we're making a difference for people. Every one of them was important, as were our legislative accomplishments. So when I spoke to you last year, our bipartisan infrastructure bill had just become law, and I explained then how it had the promise of helping us build and modernize our core infrastructure, everything from our roads to bridges and ports and airports to energy, water, broadband, and our ferry systems. And in just a year now, that's playing out better than any of us had expected. Nearly $3.2 billion from the infrastructure law has now been announced for the state of Alaska. Senator Stedman, Senator Keel, Representative Ortiz, Representative Stutz, you all know how much I love our ferry system. Yeah, number one cheerleader over there. But it was great to be able to give a call, speak directly with you, leave a message to give you the heads up that $285 million is headed our way to help our ferry system. To Senator Olson and Representative Foster, with $250 million from the infrastructure law and the matching funds that you convinced the legislature to approve, we're finally going to build Nome's Arctic Deep Draft Port. That's a huge benefit for your region. So to President Stevens and again Representative Stutz, the Coast Guard, our Coast Guard now has $210 million for projects in Kodiak to support the offshore patrol cutters that will be home ported there. There's so much good that's going on with our Coast Guard. I'm so excited as we talk about all that we're providing for our Coast Guard men and women. To Senators Hoffman, Representative Edgman, Representative Patkatak, your regions, among so many others around the state, have received major grants for broadband deployment. You know, Lyman and Bryce, your legislation to establish the state broadband office and its coordination with the delegation effort has really made a big difference in our ability to bring these dollars back to Alaska, so thank you for that. That was very, very key. Now, Senator Hoffman, you always, every year, you ask, Lisa, what are you doing on rural energy? So I want you to know, Lyman, that the Department of Energy is standing up the $1 billion program that we created for energy improvements specific to rural and remote areas. So happy belated birthday. So beyond infrastructure, I partnered with many of you to leverage my position as a senior appropriator. My annual Interior Environment Bill was chock full of Alaskan priorities, from everything from transboundary water quality monitoring to a new program that we have stood up to clean up contaminated lands around the state. This is going to be a really key initiative, and I'm very excited about what the promise holds there. Since I last spoke here, we also engaged the congressionally directed spending process to secure nearly $750 million in earmarks for Alaska to address nearly 200 local priorities around the state. Every community in Alaska has the right to clean water and to sanitation. This has led to investments from Petersburg to Palmer to St. George and all across our state. We're expanding health services. We're providing housing for the victims of abuse and the homeless. We're expanding the shipping channel to Dutch Harbor. We're taking down the Polaris building to help revitalize downtown Fairbanks. We're supporting engineering and design, the work on the gas line there, backing law enforcement needs around the state, just to highlight a couple here. And I get it, I know that there's criticisms about earmarks, but keep in mind, these allocations come from across the political spectrum. They are fully transparent, they are within budget caps, they do not increase spending levels, and quite honestly, these federal dollars would have gone elsewhere had we not fought to bring them back to Alaska. So these are priorities that Alaskans have weighed in and said, we would like your help in returning our federal taxpayer dollars back to our priorities. So on that note, the appropriations request portal on my website is now open. It's going to be open through March 17th. This is a process that I want to help in all of our communities, including including those folks who just can't hop online to apply or perhaps to travel to DC to make their pitch. That is not necessary. What is necessary, though, is for us to try to reach everyone and understand their needs. So we had some really big policy wins last year as well, in addition to talking about the funding that is coming our way. We passed my University of Alaska Fiscal Foundation Act, which will add up to 360,000 acres to the university's land grant. So this is something that President Stevens, Senator Kawasaki, I know you have been championing this for, along with many others here in the legislature, but for quite some time. And you've done it in partnership with the governor and the university, and we have been successful now. The reality is we've got a great land-grant university here in the largest state in the union, but with a smaller land grant than even Rhode Island. And so now we're going to be addressing that. We're going to be fixing that. And over time, the lands that the university receives from the state will generate additional revenues to support its students, to support faculty and campus infrastructure. So this is good for our university system. Other policy initiatives, we reauthorized the Violence Against Women Act. We secured $300 million for commercial, recreational, and subsistence harvesters that have been affected by fisheries disasters. We convinced FEMA to lift its cost-sharing requirements to ensure a quick and effective response after the remnants of Typhoon Merbok slammed western Alaska. At our military, we made historic investments in our military. We brought home $335 million for military construction, including our runways at J-Bear. We gave the men and women who serve our country a well-deserved pay raise. We passed major portions of my Arctic Warrior Act to provide additional benefits for those that are stationed here in Alaska. We also honored our promises to our veterans through the PACT Act, which will provide better care for those who suffered toxic exposure during their service. So significant legislative accomplishments. And I could go on about these, but suffice to say, last year was a good year for Alaska. Last Congress was a good year for Alaska. And we didn't get everything that we wanted. You never do. We're still pushing for that commercial icebreaker. We're not going to let up on that. But we're going to feel the benefits of the measures that passed for generations to come. So, it's a beautiful day out there. You can't tell in this chamber right now, but it's a beautiful day in Juneau. And as sunny a day as it is, there's also this next part of my speech, which is perhaps not so sunny. When I shared the direction that I was taking with my son, saying, you know, what do you think? What do you think about my comments? And he's like, ooh, Mom, this is kind of like the tough love part. But you know what? We can't talk about all of our successes without acknowledging that we have big challenges. We face big challenges as a state. You look at the analysis that Nolan Clauda and his team are producing, and it's hard. It's hard for us to look at that. We have had 10 straight years of net outmigration. Our employment growth was next to last of any state from 2015 to 2021. Our GDP declined. We're next to last over that same period. Alaska's economy is recovering from the pandemic, that's good, but it's recovering at a slower pace than almost any other state out there. We all know that the price of food and fuel is still too high. It's hard to find eggs, much less childcare or affordable housing. No one that I'm talking to, from private firms to state agencies, from schools to hospitals, can find enough workers. We're a resource state that isn't being allowed to produce resources in our vast federal areas, even potentially within our own petroleum reserve. Some of our fisheries, from crab to salmon, are collapsing, leaving families and communities without sustenance. The impacts of climate change growing worse. Too many people are struggling. Fentanyl is claiming more and more innocent lives, including those of young Alaskans like Bruce Snodgrass. Well, friends, Alaska cannot settle for being 49th in anything but statehood. We cannot settle for it. We cannot be a place where people spend part of their lives only to pack it up and leave because they don't see a future for them and their family, or watch as the kids that we raised leave here and never come back. Alaska needs to be the place where people want to move to and want to stay because they have good jobs that support their families. They have a good place to live. They have good schools where their kids can excel. They have a quality of life that cannot be matched anywhere else. Where we take care of our fellow Alaskans when they hit rough patches. And that's going to take a vision from all of us, a different sort of effort from all of us, and a recognition that while a lot of supplemental federal support has come our way between the COVID package, the infrastructure bill, we can't count on that forever. It's not open-ended here. The delegation, the administration, and the legislature are all equal partners in Alaska's success. We need to be pulling together to take full advantage of these opportunities while they're still in front of us. So as I start a new term, I'm looking at every facet of how we can make Alaska the best place to live and work and play and stay. And that comes with an extensive agenda touching on about every area of public policy. And at the top of my list is economic development. And of course, on the top of that list is the Willow Project. I'm proud that so many Alaskans, so many friends from the lower 48 have come together to push for its reapproval. And I thank the resolution that the House passed, 36-0, sends a strong message about Alaskans' unity on this project, and I understand that the Senate is considering the same here. But on this day, on February 22nd, with a little less than 2 weeks from a final decision, I am still not certain which way this is going to go. Now, know that I am absolutely, totally committed to this fight. My colleague Dan has been an absolute warrior on this. Mary has shown true courage, pushing the administration on this, standing up to the Democratic members of the House. The governor has been crystal clear on his position. And here in the legislature, you have been steadfast in your resolve. We're so thankful for that. And I also want to express my thanks to the large majority of Alaskans, especially those Alaska Natives who live on the North Slope, who are pushing for Willow. This has truly been a unified effort. But we all know this is a difficult administration to deal with. From Ambler to Anwar to the Tongass, we've had decision after decision go against us. And even this one, a socially just project located within a petroleum reserve, it's perilously close. So we need to finish strong. Every one of us needs to do everything that we can with every remaining day to make the case for why an economically viable project should be approved. Now, we also need to recognize that if the final decision on Willow should go against the recommendation of the career civil servants at the Department of the Interior. This is this administration's own experts. And so if the decision goes against their recommendation, folks, it's nothing but pure politics, and it has nothing to do with the merits of the project. Willow, though, is our priority, but it's not alone. We have the Pika project. We have the gas line. I'm more and more bullish on our mining future here in Alaska than I ever have been, so long as the EPA follows its commitment to avoid further vetoes in our state. We have incredible potential for renewable energy, from hydropower down in Angoon to geothermal at McCushion. There's more federal support than ever. We're going to deploy the first advanced nuclear reactor in a few years. We can be the global hub for both carbon sequestration and hydrogen. And I commend the governor for putting some new ideas out there, putting them on the table for carbon storage and even monetization. But there is one item out there for Alaskan energy that does not sit well with me at all, And that is the possibility of our state importing LNG to meet energy needs in the rail belt. Folks, we have extraordinary resources. We have tremendous resources on the North Slope. We have more in Cook Inlet. We have renewables. We have the promise of advanced nuclear. And really, we are going to settle for imported LNG from British Columbia? We can do better than this, folks. We should not even be considering this as a temporary solution. We should not. This is hard. This is hard because we're looking at this and it's like we're looking at the timing and it's not looking really well. So we have to find a temporary. Well, I'm afraid of the temporary solution. Why? Because in order to be able to accommodate a temporary solution, we have to make some longer-term adjustments, like moving from an export terminal to an import terminal to get the ships under contract, to make contracts with the Canadians for this. And then what happens? We get comfortable. We get comfortable getting it from somebody else instead of taking care of ourselves with our own resources. In my view, it's the definition of aiming low, and this is a long, long way from that owner state mentality that Wally Hickel preached to us. Alaskans deserve better on this one, so I'm going to challenge you to work with us. We all have to work on this. Beyond resources, another priority, of course, is workforce development. We're all talking about it. From the North Slope to the projects that are being facilitated by the infrastructure bill to everything else going on in our state, we know that we need more workers in just about every field, and that means that we need Alaskans that are trained and ready for those opportunities. So I've been able to direct funding to several workforce initiatives through the CDS process. I'm going to support the University of Alaska, Iloksavik, Ute, Northern Industrial Training, and all who prepare Alaskans for the workforce. And I'm going to do it every chance that I get. And I would ask you, I would encourage you to do the same, because we also need those state-specific solutions to educate and train Alaskans. We need to be able to attract new talent to our state, but we've got to have this workforce. You know it, I know it. Next is childcare. Wow. Wow. Who would have thought there's a federal role for childcare? There's a federal role, there's a state role, there's a local role. We know. Every region of our state lacks sufficient access to childcare, and that's taking people, particularly moms, out of the workforce. Lack of childcare, we're learning more and more, can even impact our national security footing here in the state of Alaska. I've spoken with General Nahom about this. And I think it's no exaggeration to say that it's starting to impact our readiness within the Alaska Command. We hear from the Coast Guard as well. Without child care options, Coast Guard not going to look to homeport new vessels. So this is real. At the federal level, I'm working with others on the HELP Committee to improve the Child Care and Development Block Grant Program to help make child care more affordable, help providers stay open, enable them to better recruit and retain staff. I'm going to continue to advocate for Head Start, which also faces barriers to staff recruitment and retention. And then as far as the military goes, I'm looking at ways to give leadership more authority and funding to staff child care centers and give their employees a competitive wage. I know Representative Fields has a bill that he is working on with child care. I know that others of you do as well. So I would urge you, do what you can from here by putting this issue firmly on the agenda for the 33rd Legislature. So another area is, as I travel around the state, in addition to workforce childcare, we're all hearing it, housing. We know we need more and we need better housing all across the state, from St. Lawrence Island to here in Southeast. And this is an area where, quite honestly, the federal government has a pretty limited role, so I'm looking to try to find some creative solutions, including housing for teachers, public safety, and some others. But one avenue that we can use, one tool, is through the CDS process, which can provide some assistance with site preparation and water and sewer connections that are needed before the housing can be built. We really tried to focus on that in this last round of CDS request. If you can help build out that base infrastructure, then perhaps the cost of that development is not going to be as weighty. Another area that we're looking at is the Native American Housing Assistance and Self-Determination Act. You know it as NAHASDA. We're going to be pushing hard to reauthorize that this Congress. But here again, you have some opportunities. There's some requests in the governor's budget for housing. So I would hope that you would take a look to give these thorough review, add your own ideas here. But the area that I would challenge you the most in today is transportation. We have an unprecedented opportunity to refloat our struggling ferry system. This is our shot. This is your lifeline. Please grab it. This is where I may be stepping over, because I almost never call on the legislature to do anything specific here. But I am asking you, approve the matching funds for our ferry system. This is the Alaska Marine Highway System. It is not the federal Marine Highway System. This, maybe I have to admit, because sometimes you just have to take yourself back one step. And I know that it's personal to me, because I spent my growing up years here in Southeast and know and understand what a strong marine highway system means to these communities, means to a regional economy. But the ferry system really matters. It should matter to all of us in Alaska, regardless of where you live. As we worked through the infrastructure bill, placing priorities, I made sure that people understood, in our great state, we are not well connected by road. That's why our airports are so important. That's why our ports are so important. And in our islanded regions, as we have here, as we have in Prince William Sound and the Aleutians and out on Kodiak, the Marine Highway is our highway. And so I was able to educate some folks, and it was good. It was good. And I've done what I can on this, but it's now up to you to bring it home. And I know that there are many opportunities under the infrastructure bill and under other federal measures, and I know full well the fiscal budget is tough. I get it. But the opportunities that we have created for Alaskans to invest in our future won't be fulfilled unless the legislature is able to step up with some of these state cost shares. And so, you know, when we talk about transportation, I've got to ask, what's the long-term vision here? What's the plan? When I was serving here in this chamber, Representative Jeanette James from North Pole, Jeanette sat, I think, right where you are, Dan. She had big ideas. She had big ideas about a rail connection to Canada. You know, Mike, she talked about it all the time. This was how we were going to move everything, particularly our mineral resources, and boy, was she tough on it. Frank Murkowski, you've all heard him talk about it. He's still talking about those big ideas. And yet, here we are. Here we are, all these years later. We've got good projects at risk of not being able to get off the ground because we still can't move our stuff. We need to be thinking big about how we move our people, our resources, our freight, our trash. Let's not lower our sights here. Frank is right. Frank is right on this one. To maximize development opportunities across our great state, we need to be able to move some things by rail. So let's get this conversation going again about projects like the Northern Rail Extension and the Mat-Su Rail Connection. We also, I'm all over it. Let's get some rail going there, Mike. But when we're talking about connection, let's bring it home to the Port of Alaska, because we've got to get it right. We've got to get it right there. The heart of our transportation system around the state, handling well over half of the cargo our state receives. It is imperative that we upgrade the port to modern standards. But for that to happen, everybody has to agree on the design. The delegation has stepped up to provide funding. The state has stepped up with matching funds. Thank you, Senator Merrick, wherever you are sitting. Thank you for your shoulder into that. But when I read in the Anchorage Daily News about the proposed design modifications that may cost just another $200 million with no understanding as to how we're going to pay for it, besides applying for additional federal grants, I mean, really? This port is too important to Alaskans. This project is too big to fail. We have got to get this right. Now, many of you, I know, share my passion for the Arctic, which is now on the front lines of the great power competition. What we've done so far, and they're good, the funding for broadband, water, other core infrastructure, icebreakers, the reestablishment of the 11th Airborne, Arctic-focused strategies from every branch of the military, the creation of the Ted Stevens Center for Arctic Security Studies, the recent announcement just last week of our first Arctic ambassador, a fellow Fairbankson. These are all good steps, but they're first steps. They're not our final pushes. So where do we go in the Arctic? We need to make our international territorial claims. We need to prepare for greater maritime traffic from shipping, from tourism, and resource development, both here and abroad. We need to invest more in the infrastructure to meet the needs of those who are living there. In diplomacy, to try to keep the Arctic a zone of peace. In scientific research, to better understand the region and its environment. in adaptation to address climate change, and of course, in security to protect our sovereignty. So many of us have worked to educate Washington about the strategic importance of Alaska to our nation's security. And people outside of the state of Alaska are seeing in real time now what we've been saying all these years. In a very, very short time period, Americans have seen firsthand how China is a threat, how Russia is on our doorstep, how North Korea is kind of lurking out there. Started several weeks back with a Chinese spy balloon transiting over Alaska. A few days later, our military shot down an unidentified object off the North Slope. A few days, just a couple days after that, Russian bear bombers were approaching our airspace. And then, just 2 days after that, North Korea fires off ballistic missiles, labeling the Pacific Ocean as its firing range. We know Alaska is increasingly America's first line of defense, and I am more thankful than ever for all those who serve and keep us safe. And I'll tell you, what the men and women of the 11th Air Force and the Alaska Air National Guard have so powerfully demonstrated in just these recent days is that when you threaten Alaska's sovereignty, you threaten the nation's sovereignty, and we will respond. And as we discuss the threats to national sovereignty, we acknowledge that we are now just 2 days from the 1-year mark of Russia's catastrophic war against Ukraine. It has never been more important to stand with Ukraine to help preserve their democracy. I am proud to do so. The people of Ukraine The people of Ukraine deserve our support. Their need is immense, and we applaud their courage and their continued sacrifice in the defense of democracy. What is happening in Ukraine daily is heartbreaking, but the hearts of those people are not broken. They are standing up in an extraordinary way that commands the respect of the entire world. So we are there for the people of Ukraine. Final priority I wish to raise today is caring for the vulnerable right here at home, because we have an obligation to do both. As much as we invest in infrastructure, in transportation connectors, and everything physical, we also need to invest in our people. Because as we know, not is all well in our state. Too many Alaskans are vulnerable and need our help. We need to take care of the elderly, the young, the people with disabilities, the hungry, those who face violence and abuse and addiction and mental and behavioral issues and homelessness. And we know that there are good ways to make a difference in these lives, and we need to reach for them. I was pleased to see the governor's proposal to extend Medicaid's postpartum coverage to 12 months. I think that that was important. We can also bolster our healthcare workforce, especially in our rural areas, so that Alaskans can access care closer to home. We can do more to educate Alaskans about the extreme dangers of fentanyl poisoning, as we're doing with Bruce's Law, and to stop its illegal trafficking into our state. We can provide resources to community-based organizations that support Alaskans as they undergo treatment and recover from addiction. We can reduce barriers to trauma-informed care after sexual assault. I plan to make care for the most vulnerable a priority every day that I have the privilege to serve, and I would ask that you all join with me in that. We know our state needs big projects. I've mentioned several of them here. There's so many that I haven't mentioned. Grid modernization is going to be huge. But I'll tell you, these big projects, they won't matter. They won't matter as much if we don't have healthy families and healthy communities. We have come so far as a state, but we still have a long ways to go to reach our potential. And what matters for each of us is that we're here. We're here in the arena. And sometimes the arena gets a little bit chaotic. But we've been chosen by the people of Alaska to represent them, to serve them, to listen to them, and to help them. They're counting on us to have a vision, to push that vision, whether for resources, housing, childcare, workforce development, transportation, or another big idea that can shape our state for future generations, a generation that stays instead of leaving. So the delegation has done a lot for Alaska in these past several years, and we're happy to do it, but we need our partners in the state to step forward. That's my challenge to all of you who have the privilege of serving in this 33rd legislature. And I hope I didn't step on anybody's toes with some of my perhaps more direct comments. I didn't necessarily stay in my lane today. But I'll tell you, I am comfortable in saying this to you because this is my place. This is our place. I love this place. It's where I started. It's my home. It's my family. We are family. And I want the best for our state, as I know you want the best for our state. Again, we should not be 49th in anything but statehood. So I promise you I will be with you every day as your partner, as your fellow Alaskan, to take on these big things together, to resolve our challenges together, and to help our people together. Thank you for the time that you've given me today. Thank you.
Senator Murkowski has graciously agreed to answer a few questions, so we'll begin. And if anyone has a question to ask, please raise your... Okay, Senator Hughes, beginning with Senator Hughes.
Thank you, and good afternoon or good morning. I'm not sure which it is. Senator
We're not quite there. I didn't go past Dan Sullivan's time.
All right. So first, a quick comment. Thank you for your comment about the importance of infrastructure in our state for the movement of people, of resources. And I just want to add that it's also very important for food security. And we recognize we need a lot more infrastructure for food security in Alaska. My question actually is related to your comments regarding the Arctic and national security. We know as a state we embrace our military and that we love to have that presence. But considering the era that we're in of increasing tensions that have really been demonstrated very visibly in the last couple of weeks, even in the last 24, 48 hours, I am wondering whether it is time, and I'd like your view on it, whether it's time to increase military assets in this state, whether that be military men and women, equipment, more aircraft, but particularly perhaps even another base, a naval base, a marine presence. I believe that I know I would sleep better at night because one of the things we've seen is, you mentioned, we're the first line of defense for the nation. I would arguably say we're the first line of defense. We're the gatekeeper actually for all of North America, and we saw that. So I believe DC, our leaders are recognizing that, even though, as you said, for years we've known it, but I believe what they've seen this in the last few weeks, they would also agree. So I'm wondering if it's time to step up and press for more military assets in Alaska.
Thank you, Senator Hughes. It is important, I think, that we recognize kind of where we sit when it comes to, again, this national defense. And to your point, it's not just the front lines of defense for America, but when the role with NORTHCOM, NORAD, it is North America that we're talking about here. So do we need to be doing more? I think it is important to recognize the significance of what we have currently in the state. We have more fifth-generation fighters in Alaska than anywhere else. So we're in an extraordinary position there. What we have between Fort Wainwright, Eielson, J-Bear, the missile defense system out at Fort Greely, Clear with the long-range discrimination radar, the assets that we have out in the Aleutians still. Nobody talks much about Shemya, but believe me, we still have eyes on the skies out there at the end of the chain. To your point, though, about is there more that can be done? I will share with you that one thing that Senator Sullivan and I have really been leaning in on is making sure that we have the refueling tankers that we need. It's great to have the aircraft, but if you're moving long distances and you don't have the air refueling capacity. So working to address that also with the hopefully soon addition of the newly updated, what we call E3s, but would move to E7s. That's going to be significant from a surveillance. But it's not just in the air. To your point about naval assets, we do not have that naval base. It is something that we have been pushing the military on to explore, whether it is something out in the Aleutians or elsewhere around the state. What are we doing to protect these extraordinary waters? We talk a lot about Coast Guard because Coast Guard is us here in Alaska. But when you appreciate how much they have to cover, and their job is homeland defense here, so making sure that Coast Guard has the assets, the upgraded, modernized fleet that they need, and we have made extraordinary strides in addressing just that. We have obviously much more to do on the icebreaker side of things, because that too is an asset that is yet unaddressed. We have authorized 3 full polar security cutters, funded 2, but the problem is you blame everything on COVID, you blame everything on workforce, but at the end of the day, we still don't have an icebreaker. That's why this commercially available icebreaker was going to be a gap filler. So we got to get that back into the queue so that we're not left uncovered here. But believe you me, it's not only the Navy that we're pushing, but the Marines as well. Where's the Marine presence in Alaska? And would that not be something of consideration? The fact that we had all branches of the services put forward an Arctic strategy to be incorporated as part of our national security strategy is really quite considerable. So we have made extraordinary progress in the past decade or so when it comes to Arctic security, but in my head, Arctic security equals national security. So thank you to the communities that embrace our military into your community. It makes a difference. So everything that we can be doing from the asset side, but also making sure that the men and women and their families are cared for, whether it's housing in the interior, whether it's mental health services, whether it's good schools, we all have a role in supporting that as well. So thank you to our Alaskan communities that embrace our military like no other state I know. Thank you for the question, Senator Hughes.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Prax.
Thank you. Senator Murkowski, you and the other members of the delegation gave us a lot of assistance in the interior to reach some sort of an agreement with the EPA over air quality goals. And roughly the goal was, all right, you give us the goal, we'll figure out how. And that was quite a community effort. Mm-hmm. And now they're reneging on that promise. So we need a little more attention brought to that situation. We can figure it out, but frankly, we cannot figure it out the way they want us to figure it out. So we'd like some help on that. Thank you.
No, thank you for raising it, and I think it's going to be important. You know that EPA will hold, I guess, an open comment hearing up in Fairbanks. I think it's the 8th of March here. It's going to be important for the voices from the interior to be heard, clearly articulated as to why this, I was going to say why this approach is so detrimental. That's kind of putting it way too politely. What will happen if the EPA were to not continue working with Fairbanks and the interior communities on this, is so punitive without regard to the efforts that have been made to reduce your emissions. I'm told by EPA that you have fully reduced by half your emissions. That is nothing short of remarkable. And it has not come without pain and consequence. Families have had to make some costly transitions in order to comply. And yet it seems as if there's no credit given and a failure to recognize that the options for addressing the remaining constraints are not economically viable. And so what does that mean to a community when you don't have the options? The option is just not to force everybody to move out, because I think that there are some who actually think that that would be a better outcome. That is not an approach or a strategy that works. So there's a little bit of responsibility, maybe a lot of responsibility on the EPA. We tried to help with these wood stove changeout. We've put a lot of money into that, a lot of federal resources to help with that. And then the EPA can't figure out their own certification standards for the wood stoves. So we don't even know if it's helping. I mean, these are the types of things where I know people are looking at this saying, the government is saying they're here to help, and in fairness, they haven't done much to help us out with. So what I was hoping that I might be able to do, and if we can't do it on this trip, the Interior Delegation, folks on my team, on Sullivan's team, on Peltolla's team, with the state administration here, we need to be talking about what this strategy is. Because if you fail, according to EPA standards, to meet their compliance and the punitive measures, the enforcement measures come in, it's an enforcement not just against Fairbanks in the interior. The penalty is that the state of Alaska loses their federal highway dollars. Whoa, if that doesn't get the attention of everybody in this room, this is what we're talking about. This is high stakes stuff in a place where the community has tried valiantly to address it, made great strides, and yet it's not good enough. And you know what EPA's biggest fear is right now? Well, we're going to get litigated. Get litigated every day. Work with the communities. So we really need the interior to be coming together on this. Thanks for the question, Mike.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Fields.
Thank you, Senator Murkowski, for you and the delegation's extraordinary and inspiring work to support democracy in Ukraine through appropriations, with passage of the CHIPS Act. The work that you all have done with the administration is incredible. And my question with regard to that is, when we see these authoritarian governments like China and Russia allow production of natural resources with no environmental controls, no greenhouse gas controls, what do you see as an opportunity for a border adjustment fee or similar policies to make sure that our American producers, who produce so much cleaner, at least have a level playing field and we're not helping out these authoritarian regimes? Thank you.
You got a couple different things here in your question, Representative Fields, and thank you. So there is an interesting discussion going on about a border carbon adjustment fee, a carbon border adjustment fee, and what that might mean. And could that be something that is going to help kind of level the playing field, allow us to be more competitive in this space? And there have been other aspects of a broader carbon plan that have been talked about. But I think one area where you're seeing Republicans and Democrats looking at this and saying, all right, this is something that we might want to have a more fulsome discussion on about what we might want to do. There's a level of caution here, though, because when you're imposing these effectively tariffs on things coming into the country, what is that going to do? We all know that we are supply chain constrained, particularly in a state like Alaska. So we've got to look at that critically to see how that will impact us. But I'll kind of go a little bit beyond the carbon border adjustment to the whole issue of basically where we get our stuff. Because we're talking a lot about what we're going to be doing in building out our renewable energy resources, what more we need to be doing to win the war when it comes to not only solar panel production, but chips manufacturing. And at the end of the day, it all comes back to you gotta have the stuff that allows you to build the smartphone or build the pen or coat the blades on the wind turbine. And so where are we getting this? How are we accessing our own resources to benefit our own country? And so the great debate now about not just critical minerals, but minerals in general, from rare earths to everything else, is how and where are we sourcing? Because right now, the United States, in my view, is taking the easy route. We're looking to other countries to help give us what it is that we want, so that we can be strong, so that we can beat you, so that we can win the climate race, we can win the arms war. We need all of this, but it's just easier to get it from somewhere else. Perhaps other places where your environmental laws are so lax they're practically non-existent. Perhaps from places where child labor laws are non-existent, and literally you have children carrying cobalt out in baskets on their back. And we'll look the other way to who it comes from and how it got there, because we need the resource. Instead of saying, how can we not only take care of ourselves, have the resources that we need, but also be honest instead of being hypocrites about our need for a resource. And whether it is oil or cobalt, name your resource out there. We've got to be honest about it. We have stronger environmental standards, stricter environmental standards in this country than you will find just about anywhere else out there. We have labor laws that protect our people in ways that we should be proud. And we can utilize the technology that we have in place to access our resources in a way that is in concert with your environment. I was proud to stand with the people of the North Slope and have whaling captains stand there and say, thank you for not only protecting our whaling quota, but thank you for working so hard to get Willow opened, because we need that resource. Because we know that the way that it will be developed here will be in concert with our standards, so that we can continue the subsistence lifestyle that we have up here. Not every place can say that, but we have been able to, and we will continue to be able to. And so how we exchange our vulnerability for a resource, for the ease of gaining it from somewhere else at someone else's expense, we've got to look at ourselves in the mirror And this is one of those areas where the administration is saying the right thing. We need to be producing more of our own critical minerals. And then they fail. They fail in doing much of anything to help advance access to that. And so you can't have it both ways. You just can't. Thanks for the question, Zach. And thanks
Thank
for
you,
what you're doing
Senator.
on childcare.
Representative Ortiz.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Murkowski, for being with us here today. Thank you for your both inspiring and challenging words that you put before us, this particular body today. My questions kind of go a little along perhaps a different route as to the questions you've heard previously, but in the end, it's not really. As you know, I'm from Ketchikan. Your parents currently live in Wrangell, and both those communities live in areas that are very close to some river systems like the Unic and the Stikine, where just 50 miles to the east of us, there's planned and continued movement towards large-scale mining development projects that potentially could threaten our very important fishing industry. As you know, the fishing industry is the second largest or largest private employer in the state of Alaska, and there's challenges out there that that need to be addressed. And one of those potential challenges is the potential impact that could come from this large-scale mining development that's been going on for the last 20 years or so on the other side of the border. My question is, can you give us an update on your transboundary work with the Biden administration and Canadian officials, and what kinds of solutions can Alaskans expect in the coming years on that particular topic?
It's an important one. It's an important one. We can work things within our own state. It's another thing when you're dealing with not even another state, but another country. Another country, which makes it complicated because we have international agreements. Obviously, Canada is free to produce their resources as we are free to produce our resources. But when it's recognized that there is impact that flows across boundaries, that's where we have to have levels of cooperation. And that's where, I think that's where some of the frustration has been. We have the International Boundary Commission, commissioners, both Canadian and US, that are charged with kind of doing this oversight. In fairness, for a while, there wasn't a lot of teeth in terms of are they resourced as a commission. We've kind of addressed that. When we first began looking at this issue some years ago, there was no monitoring that was being done, whether around the Stikine, the Unic, or any of the other transboundary waters. And so what we have done over the years is continued to provide for that baseline monitoring, so that in a way it's precautionary, but we need to know. We need to know by the monitoring that has gone on. So that has been in place now for probably, I don't know, I would say a decade. I'm looking to my fish guys back there, whether it's been a full decade about that. And we, in this past appropriation cycle, continued that funding. We've added another watershed area. So that's happening on our side. There was an effort, this was actually back in the Walker-Malott administration, where there was more direct engagement from the administration directly with our neighbors on the Canadian side. I think some of that has kind of, I don't think it's fair to say stalled out, but it hasn't been as elevated. It has been hard. I will tell you, it has been hard in the State Department to get the attention focused on this. There's an issue right now on transboundary water quality over in the Montana area, and their issue has now helped elevate our issue here, because they've actually got issues that are real and present and threatening water quality on the U.S. side. It's awful to say, but that, until there's something bad happens, it's hard to get it to register with state. And so this is something where, again, it helps us as your federal delegation to have you all keep pushing us on these issues so that we can go back to state and say, you know, we got all these folks back home, and you're not assigning a level of priority that needs to happen with this. So as much as this administration is focused on environmental issues, as much as this administration is focused on kind of care for the environment, but also a real keen and appropriate focus on Indigenous peoples and impact on things like food security, you would think that this would register a little bit higher, and it has not. I've raised it at the secretary level with Secretary Blinken, and you know, the part of the problem is these Secretary of State folks are pretty occupied with the crisis of the day rather than we want to prevent a crisis from happening. So we're going to keep that from happening, but it requires vigilance. So help us with that. Thanks.
Thank you, Senator. Our last question will be from Representative Cronk.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Murkowski, for being here today. There's so many important things I could ask a question about, but the one thing that never fades for me is our ways of life and protecting our ways of life up here, whether it's hunting, fishing, or trapping. And the other day I read an article from the Yukon, and it stated in 2023, the Yukon River Chinook is functionally extinct. And in 2023, we're watching a culture, a way of life, a source of food go away. You know, in 2023, we're watching the smoke forever disappear from our smokehouses. So what is being done at the federal level, and what more can we get done to, you know, protect not only a way of life, but a culture? Yeah. Thank you.
You know, for those of you that represent coastal communities, just think about the significance of what Representative Cronk has said. This is, when we talk about fish disasters, it is not isolated to one area. I mean, you represent the heart of the interior, and you're being impacted by what we're seeing in our oceans. It's all connected, folks. And it's challenging because, as we know, there are so many different factors at play here, some which we can control and some which we cannot. And so trying to understand everything that we're still struggling in trying to understand the science, we know that we can put more money towards data and research. And we have been doing that aggressively, everything from the fish disaster money, but more important on the resource side, what we've been putting into NOAA, into the agencies for not only monitoring, but just the pure research, whether it's everything from ocean acidification to understanding what's happening with the temperatures to the food chain that the species survive on. But it is hard to be able to talk to somebody whose family relies on a full smokehouse, a full freezer to make it through the winter, and to have them say, you don't need to give me research. I know that there's no fish. I know that there's no fish. And so the need is so immediate that it feels so limited and weak to be able to say, we're going to spend more money on research. I had one gentleman tell me, he says, Lisa, can't you just put the fish back in the river? And you know, he's not being flip. He's speaking for his family. And so we've got Board of Fish that's meeting in Anchorage today. They've got some management decisions that they need to be working through. This is really the proverbial all hands on deck in terms of what we can do to understand. I have made clear, and Senator Sullivan has been really direct. He's on the Committee of Jurisdiction on the Commerce Committee. But we've been bringing agency people up to the state to see and hear and understand and listen. They've been helpful. That's going to help. We've got to understand when we're talking about issues like bycatch, from a management perspective, how do we deal with these things? Those are things that we can manage. Something like understanding how ocean acidification is impacting our salmon species. Those are harder, longer term, but there are some things that we can be looking at in the here and now. I know down here in Southeast, this litigation coming out of the environmental organizations that would effectively shut down our trawl industry here. These are matters where sometimes it's a matter of shortage of resource that we don't understand, and then there are issues like this, which in my view are nothing more than litigants who are looking to shut down an entire industry and basing it on assumptions that are not true to the Alaska situation. So we have so many challenges in front of us with regards to our fisheries. But I think it's fair to say that we recognize you don't have to be from a coastal community or represent a coastal region in order to understand the priority and the significance of what this means. We're talking food security here, certainly, but it really is a cultural identity. We came to the Union, the state of Alaska came to the Union over the fight over fish. And fish is still at the forefront of our discussions and priorities.
Thank you so much, Senator Murkowski. We greatly appreciate your being with us and your leadership. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the time today.